The next part that they did get right was that Theseus' mom did eventually lead him to his true destiny and the truth about his birthright. After the death of his mother and Theseus escaped being a slave for Hyperion, he went back home to properly bury his mother, and as he placed her in her coffin, he realized that there was something stuck there. And as he broke the rock to get to this thing, he realizes that is this divine bow and arrow. So this reminds me very much of Mary Renault when his mother leads him to the stone which he must physically lift to realize his birthright and get the sword that belongs to him. Um, but as you realize, the bow and arrow and sword are two different things, and I could never figure out why they used the bow instead of a sword, because the bow and arrow was never really used. In the movie, it was only used by him once, and then it got stolen away by King Hyperion. So the next part that they sort of got right was the relationship between Theseus and Phaedra. Um, in later years, they are together after Ariadne is pushed to the side. But however, the timeline is all messed up because now they've completely dismissed Ariadne and brought Phaedra to the forefront. Um, this is really confusing because in my mind, I still think of Mary Renault and I think of how Phaedra was still a very young child who fell in love with him as a bull leaper. But this time she is a priestess and oracle and Theseus' lover. A fourth thing that they got right was in Mary Renault's book, Theseus is talking about who will write his eulogy and his history when he has to be the one to write it because nobody else will write it for him. And in the movie, Theseus actually says a very small and paraphrased line where he does quote that, and I thought it was very interesting that they kind of found the right moment and the right place to put that in there as he's talking to King Hyperion, and he's saying how he will die for basically being able to not save his people and lead them in the right direction, and no one will remember him. And Theseus basically tells him that I wrote my history and people will remember this day, people will remember what I did to save these people. And so it was really interesting that that was actually the one thing that they got right within the whole movie. Lastly, I want to talk about this film and how successful it is, but the story is not complete. The way they use Theseus is that they use the Greek mythology as kind of a background to pull bits and pieces and basically make their own. It's not a complete story, and for students like us who've been studying mythology for a semester, this is very concerning because as much as the movie succeeds in giving us an adrenaline rush and being an action-packed film, as far as the storyline is really, really just horrible. And it's so hard to understand. We can't identify the gods. The relationships are a bit confusing. The story is just very, very incomplete, and it's hard for us to get a grasp and understanding of a modern interpretation of a Greek story if they're really not even using the story correctly.
And just to add a little to that, I think the typical audience target that they were looking for, I don't know who that was, because if it was people who read or study mythology, which would be us, we didn't understand the movie and really appreciate it to that degree, or if it was people who don't read mythology at all but just like the entertainment factor of it, it still wasn't used accurately, or it was confusing enough to where you would question who was who and you didn't really understand the purpose of certain things. So I think the target person that they were aiming for would have been either someone that kind of likes mythology but doesn't know that much about it. But even given that, they gave no background information about the gods or about the story of Theseus or anything. And I mean, the whole point of the king Hyperion, you know, invading basically the entire world was kind of lacking as to why he was even doing this, and they missed that whole point about the whole story.
Yeah.
And they mentioned it briefly for like 5 seconds in the beginning of the movie that the gods didn't listen to his prayers about his family dying,
Yeah.
but that was it.
Yeah.
Besides that, you didn't really understand his intentions and why he was so dramatic. and everything was so animalistic from his interpretations, his warriors, his even the fact that the oracles died in a bowl. It was just all very confusing and different elements that didn't match and mix together.
Made a very great point to mark all of his warriors. He clawed way he felt like everybody would be equal, but then he had 2 different masks that he wore himself that again had nothing to do with the bull. There was one with a very large crab claw over his scalp, over his head, and then there was another one that looked like it was kind of eating his face. And it's just, there's nothing that really explains why these things are there. There are things that are very stark and that you, even if you don't know any kind of history about it, you see it, but you have no idea what's there. You have no idea what it means.
They try really hard to use this bull as a motif, a symbolism of King Hyperion's power and of just rage against the gods. However, the bull is only used as a symbolism within King Hyperion's camp. The bull is only used as a method of torture when he kills the 3 other priestess that was along with the oracle. And lastly, the bull also was a representation of basically his best and brutal warrior that tries to attack Theseus after he has buried his mother in a temple that is similar to a labyrinth. So they tried to pull a lot of different symbolisms and moments within Theseus' story, but it's so fragmented that it's hardly complete and very confusing for people who are simple moviegoers or mythology students or scholars. So this movie is a complete fail.
Essentially so. It's a very entertaining watch if you would like to forget that you know anything about mythology, but
it's a complete
or if you don't really want to follow along, or I don't know. There's just a lot of, like you said, fragmented pieces that didn't make sense to me, including like the Titan warriors themselves, the Titan warriors. Like it was just once you
there were thousands of little
minions
that were called Titans, and from what we read about the creation and the rest of mythology, that is not how the Titans should be represented.
They did not seem like they were intelligent creatures whatsoever. They just seemed like little
mindless creatures.
Large
just to
ants.
Add to the race card again, they were black.
Yes.
I don't know. I just didn't. There's just a lot of missing pieces, a lot of misrepresentations from gods, relationships, or the story overall. It was just all fragmented and incomplete.
So we deem this movie as a very big fail.
Don't go see it.
Don't see it. Thank you so much for this great semester, and we hope to take another class with you.
Yes. And I hope you enjoyed our video.
I hope it wasn't too long.
Thank you.
Thank you.